Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Shape the System. Talking to Pete today from Seabin, and some of you who have been around Australia may have heard of Seabin. We're going to talk all about the Seabin product later, but before we do, Pete, just introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about where you're coming from, and then we're going to dive straight into the problem space.
Yeah, so my name's Pete Ceglinski, CEO, co-founder at Seabin. I'll be turning 45 in August. I've got two little boys. One's turning 5 tomorrow, the other turns 4 at the end of the year. I live up in Byron Shire, where I grew up. I haven't actually lived in Australia for about 12 years or something. And yeah, I started Seabin when I was 37. This is my third life. So my first life was a product designer. The irony of that is that I specialized in plastic injection molding. And so some of the products that I've helped manufacture, design, and get on a shelf commercialize are probably in the ocean. And yep. I hope to think that we've collected some of it as well. And my second life was a boat builder, traveling the world for 12 years
right,
for America's Cup racing teams and surfing my brains out and just cruising like no care in the world.
Generally having a good time. I love that. All right. Firstly, just noting that I'm also turning 45 in August, so I'm not sure how that works, but that's awesome. I'm very happy about that.
19th.
10th. Although I'm not sure what risk there is of putting our exact birthdays on the internet for all to see. I'm sure they're out there somewhere anyway.
Give me a credit card number.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just hold it up on the screen for anyone who joins the video later. Hey, just one thing that came out there was in your prior existence, I guess, making injection molded plastic and it ending up in the ocean. Even though I know Seabin has gone through a bit of an arc and a pivot, we're going to talk about that later. Is that still where your headspace is at? It's in plastic pollution in the ocean. Is that kind of narrow us down a bit?
Yes and no. The core, I don't know what the good word for it is, but like the core functionality of what we do is plastic pollution. And more specifically, our niche is microplastic. We're filling a global data gap because nobody had put this rubbish bin in the water to filter water 24/7 with the capabilities of, really understanding what's in the water. And yes and no. Well, we've really evolved since 2016 when I just thought we were going to clean up. And for me at the time, that was the smart idea. We're going to clean up. And so I'm not an activist. I'm not an environmentalist or any of that jazz. And I'd love to learn. And so we put the Seabin in the water. Facebook sends the video viral. There's a couple of billion views. And because if you see it on Facebook, it must be like all of a sudden you're an authority because you've got this bin. And when we're just bumbling around, we just put the garbage bin in. And I was like, holy shit, well, I need to upskill a bit. And so as I'm I think I got a little bit smarter. Cleaning up isn't a solution. It's prevention. You shouldn't have the problem in the first place. And even to now, we pivoted to an impact data model. And people are like, well, why you guys just get out there and clean up? Stop screwing around with this data shit and do some real things. And we're like, well, actually, the data is the real thing that changes world policies, legislation. If we're trying to go to a government, say we need $20 million we're going to filter Sydney Harbour for the next 10 years, they're like, give us the proof.
Yeah.
And the proof is data. So,
all right. And I want to get into the product a bit later on. And just to give some people who may not have seen the billions of views on those videos, the Seabin that came to market in 2016, and the videos I saw and tell me where I'm incorrect here, was essentially put in a marina where there was boats, and it was like, hey, there's waste coming out of these boats or in and around marinas where people are. So if we put these bins here, it'll collect this rubbish. So just that initial product I have correct. Is that right?
The product angle is correct. Where the plastic come from is just totally incorrect.
Which is what I want to segue to. So the reason why I just wanted to start there was to try to put people in the zone of there is this large challenge, which I think some of us are kind of surface level aware of, or maybe even deeply aware of, that there is a plastic pollution problem and that a big chunk of that ends up in waterways. And I don't mean that specifically to mean oceans. It can mean rivers. It can mean estuaries. It can mean anywhere. And obviously it's ending up even in non-waterways. And the thing that is the interesting shift here, which is what we're going to talk a lot about today, is that it is not enough to go and clean up this plastic. Yes, you do need to do that to get rid of it, but unless you solve the problem of how it got there in the first place and the accountability around that, then you're never going to solve the problem. You're always going to end up with more waste here. And so that lands us in the zone as to where Seabin's playing today. But before we go into the data and the analytics part of this and how you're operating, just help us understand what's fundamentally broken around governance and accountability for trying to stop that waste getting into those waterways in the first place.
No one's got the balls to own up to the fact that they're polluting the environment.
Right.
I'm going to go into a bit more, but like in one statement, like brutally honest, they just don't have the balls to stand up and say, hey, we're doing our best, but all of this rubbish and litter is coming off our streets and it's going into the stormwater drains and it's entering into the harbour. So let's not talk about it. Let's talk about something else. And it's really disappointing. Morally, it's disappointing. I don't know. I just get really pissed off about this stuff. And what we found out was in Sydney Harbour, for example, when we went there and we said, hey, we're cleaning up, we're going to clean up, I think it was 28 tonnes in the next 2 years. We actually got 100 tonnes in 2 years. So 50 tonnes a year of this plastic pollution. And we said, we're going to clean up, we're going to do 28 tonnes. And they're like, well, look, you can't prove it's ours. And it's not even our problem anyway, because it's in the water. And then it was the finger guns coming out. So we're going to point left and point and say, hey, it comes from them. It comes from them. It's not from us. And so accountability and governance was the first two things that really opened my eyes to higher level stakeholders. When we found out that, say, there's 14 levels of different layers of governance in Sydney Harbour. You have the LGAs, the different councils. You have someone's boundary finishes at high tide, someone's at low tide. Sydney Water looks after Darling Harbour onto the Piedmont Bridge, and then New South Wales Transport looks after the harbour from the Piedmont Bridge outwards. But the thing is, this rubbish that's coming in, 98% from the streets, it knows no boundaries. So it could come from the North Shore, the South Shore, depends on the wind, the tide, stormwater drains, and the whole thing. But that is just the elephant in the room, which is a financial train wreck waiting to happen. So we'll get into that later. But anyway, that was my rant.
Well, no, this is really an important part of it, because I think we tend to think of rubbish as probably at the ends of either of those parts of the transaction. Like it's either on the beach and someone needs to pick it up, or someone should never have dropped it in the first place. And it ignores what happens for everything that's in between and who might be, or who are the various people or institutions or companies, whatever it is, that might have some degree of accountability or responsibility for either it being there or for dealing with it now that it's there. And your fundamental premise here is that it is impossible to create any form of accountability around this if the data isn't there to begin with. Is that right?
That's correct. Like you're going to have, let's say an initiative comes out, it's to say between $3 to $20 million to do some kind of enforcement on single-use plastics or something like this. You need to prove it because it's a taxpayers funded initiative. So you need data, you need monitoring, you need reporting, you need metrics. And for stuff in the water, like it's really hard unless you've got this Seabin or another device to have frequent and accurate data. So
and to also be able to triangulate that data as to what's happening and where has it come from. You know, you mean we're putting trackers on whales and watching them swim around the ocean for a while to know where whales go, but we don't have the same level of understanding about how a certain bit of plastic or plastic in general arrived in a particular location?
Yes and no. Let's say 99% of the debris that we capture, you can't track it from, but there is maybe there's 2% that we can. So geotagged items, and the craziest, most fortuitous one that we found was parking tickets. That are issued with the name of the issuing body, so an LGA or the city or this type of thing. Local council. It's got the date and time of issue. It's got the cross street. It's even got like the number plates of the person that got the ticket. And so anyway, so we started to find these parking tickets in the Seabins, and we've got maybe, as of 6 months ago, we had 136 of them. So maybe now we've got 150, 200. And so we just went to Google Maps and started pinning them.
Wow.
Where they were issued and then where they were captured in the water. And it all points to, in Sydney, the majority of it's area catchment 30 for the stormwater drains, which is Surrey Hills, Central, CBD. Yeah. And it's really obvious because it's the more people, the more trash and the more stuff in the water. And then the second data set was really interesting, which is, sycamore trees. The leaves from sycamore trees look like a Canadian maple leaf type looking thing.
Right, okay.
And so we started to see, whenever we see heaps of microplastics and rubbish in the water, there's tons of these leaves. And so I downloaded this plant identifier app thing, and I took a picture of what was in the water. This is an American sycamore tree. I went down to Pitt Street, and looked around. There's these trees everywhere, and I took a picture, American sycamore. I looked down in the gutter. There's ciggy butts and all this crap everywhere, and there's leaves. So I took another picture, American sycamore. I went down to Circular Quay, saw floating bottles, crap everywhere, and these leaves. And so the leaves are predominantly found in the CBD. They've been planted, shade trees. It's there for a reason, but it's this other indicator that it's coming off the city streets. And
yeah. And so what's fascinating about this for me is that if we're trying to understand who might have some degree of ability to solve an upstream problem, unless the data's there to begin with, you're punching in the dark, right? You literally have no idea that it's because of a bunch of parking tickets in Surrey Hill as opposed to, in this case, another suburb in Sydney. But obviously this is one of hundreds of possible examples of if you don't measure it, you can't fix it, which is a maxim that applies to everything. Just in terms of the types of institutions or organisations who ultimately are probably going to have some play in this, right? They're either going to be directly accountable or they're going to be a contributor or a stakeholder like a city council. Who are the types of stakeholders who would benefit the most from this data or have the most to, gain/lose, if you like? Who are the stakeholders?
Everybody. Honestly, there's 13 different layers from federal, state and local government down to the local community. But closer to the top is food and beverage industry, manufacturing, construction, this type of thing. So the thing that gets me is people get voted in. You got a mayor, you got politicians, you're getting voted in. So you need to listen to the community. Community don't want to see plastic in the water. They don't want to see litter anywhere in the environment. And so if you're a politician and you're trying to find a few more points around voting time, you would want to be doing things that community wants, right? And plastic in the water it's not normal. It shouldn't be there. You don't want to see any plastics at the beach. And so you would think that local, state or federal government would really make some initiative around it. And they have been, but they've just been dodging the microplastics and the stuff in the water for 3-4 years now that I know of. Hopefully with the new government in, we might see something a bit different. But the other people that have the most at stake is the food and beverage industry. I love chocolate and...
Dark chocolate or milk chocolate, by the way? That's an important question.
I go for dark chocolate. There's that Lindt one that's sea salt caramel and yeah.
Yeah.
But if you give me any chocolate, I'm going to eat it. I'm not going to throw it, not say no. But a lot of people drink Coca-Cola. A lot of people drink soft drinks in those 600ml Coke bottles. Nestle. It's they got so many brands, Mars and all that. And everybody eats and drinks it or have done in their life. And so imagine what would happen. There's so many 600ml Coke bottles or just bottles in general that are in the water that it's branded litter. It's got their name on it. It's got Nestle. It's got Coke. It's got Sprite and this type of thing. And it makes them look bad. So their consumers, the customers are letting them down. They drink their Coke, they put it in the bin or they don't, and it ends up in the water. And so Coke didn't put it in the water, but they facilitated it with a Coke bottle and it's got their name on it. So it looks really bad. So imagine that legislation comes in because the data that we give to government, whoever, decision makers, Coke bottles are pretty much up there. We catch 1,100 soft plastics a day and Kit Kats are the number one chocolate wrapper that we find in the water. So imagine Kit Kat wrappers get banned or 600ml Coke bottles get banned. You've got a really valuable product line that will cease to be continued. And so the economic impact of that is huge. There's going to be tens of thousands of people losing their jobs, losing mortgages, can't get the kids to school and all that sort of shit because of branded litter and pollution. Coca-Cola is going to have to stop. Sprite, Nestle, Kit Kat, whoever they are, they're losing a really profitable product line because of the pollution and the branded litter.
Yeah, there's that as a direct impact, worst case scenario. But even in the in any attempt for them to want to be a good stakeholder here, the thesis here is that if there is data that helps to hold them to account, or at least to provide them with the data and say, if you want to be good at the problem, here's what the problem looks like. And we can tell you that's what, because we've got 100 of these things that record microplastics and other plastics, and we understand the makeup of the plastic that you use in your particular PET version of your bottle. So even if it doesn't have your label on it, we know it's come from one of your bottles. And so you are able to, you being not necessarily Seabin, but maybe a government or maybe an ordinance or maybe an association is able to have a different conversation with a particular retailer. So you have to be more active in ensuring that this stuff that you produce and that you sell doesn't end up in this location. And about that type of interplay, is that where I'm going?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I mean, I think it was on LinkedIn or it was an email or something I'd said to some of the Coke executives, 1 in every 9 or 10 things has got your name on it. Would you like to be part of the solution? I didn't come at them and try to fight them and fist raise and all any of that sort of weird shit. It was like, how do we find a symbiotic solution between us? Because we know you're the problem. Consumers are the problem. Humans are the problem. But it's got your name on it. So, it's making you look bad. So how about we find a solution? And Coca-Cola actually said, yes, we would like to be involved. And we set up a good little program with them. We didn't get too much pushback on partnering with the enemy or any of that sort of shit. A couple of trolls came out of the woods, but of course, 2 out of, say, a couple of 100,000 followers is, it was good. But we did the same with Nestle. Kit Kats are the number one snack wrapper that we find, and it's, it's by you. Do you want to come down and check it out? They said yes. They rocked up with these 600 ml plastic water bottles and had a look around, and we haven't heard from them since. So we're always looking for symbiotic, diplomatic solutions because we've built a world out of plastic. Like I'm wearing a plastic Patagonia jacket, my earphones are plastic, my phone's plastic, the computer's plastic. Like my money is, everything's made out of plastic and it's amazing. We're just let down with, we don't know how to use it properly because we're throwing shit away. We're not building it properly, not designing it. I don't know if I could swear here, but people are like, fuck plastic. And it's not, that's not it. Because the same person that says fuck plastic is typing it on their phone that's made out of plastic and metal and all these different things. And it's like, how about we just get smarter and stop blaming an inanimate material for our problems?
Yeah. And just coming back a little bit to just taking Coke as the example, just because you use Coke specifically. Once an organisation, so I'm not talking about maybe a council that has facilities and infrastructure to collect waste or process waste, in this case plastic waste, but an organisation who produces it and is clearly part of the problem, them and the consumer of that product. You can use Coke as the example or another one. How might they utilise that data to then take some action with themselves or with the consumer of that product to impact that problem?
I truly don't have an accurate answer for you, but I can only assume that they should be looking at this as a very holistic problem with a longer term vision because their accountants, their bean counters, the people that are watching the revenue should be able to predict that in 10 years, with all of this, I don't know, like enviro sort of awareness happening, our products are in the environment with our name on it. There's going to be product bans. And if there's a product ban, we're going to lose X amount of millions or billions of dollars a year. So the accountants and the forecasters should be predicting this. And I hope they are because it's a big ship to turn around, right? It's not going to happen overnight, but they're starting to steer away from it. So you notice that they come out with alternative materials. They're trying to promote more recycling, this type of thing. And they are making an effort, but they're just such a behemoth of a company that is so prominent and it's just a big target for everyone to throw their darts at.
Yeah.
But I think they can do more.
Sure. I guess where I was going with that wasn't, is there significant motivation and can they connect the dots? I think that will come down to the organisation and, how real it is for them. And that will only be a matter of time. As you said, the trend is only moving in one direction. I'm more thinking if an organisation or an institution is presented with or buys the data from you in an effort to do that, what typically might they be doing to shift the problem? Is it to resolve the problem? Is it to use alternative materials or is it to try to be part of the upstream, make sure that it doesn't end up in the environment in the first place? Like what's typically their action with the data?
It's definitely prevention. For example, you mentioned alternative materials. The material's not the problem. The problem is the human. It's human behavior that is an overarching problem because if we were smarter, a bit more diligent, we'd have better products. We wouldn't be throwing stuff away. We wouldn't have plastics in the ocean. We wouldn't have a need to put Seabins in the water. If we had alternative materials, we just have another litter category.
Right.
So swap out plastic with some other material, you've still got this human that possibly doesn't put it in the bin and just chucks it, or systems, waste recovery, waste management. It's not perfect, so there's still waste leakage. It'll still end up in the environment. It's just a different material. In terms of the data, it's like we're seeing a trend in prevention. Consumerism is changing. So, I don't know, I'll hold up this cup. If you had 2 cups and they were the same, similar price point, one of the cups was saving the oceans and the other one didn't do anything. It just gave a profit to the shareholders or whoever it was. And consumers are changing. So we want to see more purpose and impact built into the world. And so I'm going to buy the cup that saves the oceans. I want purpose attached to my purchase. And marketing, sustainability, ESG, reporting of companies to show that they're more responsible. So a software company has no means to plant a rainforest, or they've got nothing to do with the ocean. But they have they'll have a sustainability budget or a marketing budget. And so they're like, well, we want to buy X amount of carbon credits to help we're going to try and sequester carbon and plant more trees. Or, hey, Seabin, we would like to buy your impact data. We want to support cleaning the oceans, where we want to be more responsible. We don't have a means to do that because we only do software. They promote that through their customers. They tell the world that, hey, we're doing this and that. And the values align with this new consumer market. And this is the trend that we're seeing, but it was actually built 20 years ago with a carbon market.
And I want that's a really good sort of segue for a couple of things I want to talk to. Firstly, I want to understand a little bit more about the impact data in the context of Seabin. So it started with plastic in the oceans, but really this is about understanding environmental impact wherever that might be found in an ocean or waterway or even non-water. Is that correct? Like when you think about impact data, you're thinking more holistically than that at the moment?
Yeah, impact data is quite a general term. When we say impact data, we dial it back down to microplastics, floating plastic pollution.
Yep.
But there's an emerging biodiversity market that's just come up, say, 3-4 months ago. And essentially, the carbon market's worth $900 billion. And it's proof of concept that it's profitable, investable to repair nature. But the problem was, it has quite a few problems, but the idea was, okay, if you can do this for carbon and planting trees and this type of thing, regeneration, what about the rest of nature? So there's a couple of brainiacs, the Task Force for Nature Financial Related, God, I always screw up the acronyms. Anyway, TFND, TNFD. And so they wrote the book on the carbon market. They're writing the book on a nature market. So you could be out repairing wetlands or mangroves. And if you have the data, if you can turn that into a financial product like a credit or an offset or something, and this is what companies buy to be more responsible, to connect with a changing consumer market. We just happen to be cleaning up microplastics and plastic pollution. And so we have this impact data because we have a positive impact on nature, and then we have the data, impact data. And so we've turned this into a financial product that 4 years ago, I would have told you to get lost. I'm busy doing real things. If you had have asked me about my data and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm just doing shit that I can touch. I like kicking the wheels on the car, and this is imaginary back end sort of stuff. Like I'm
busy making a physical product that you can see and stick in the water and collects actual rubbish.
Yeah. And then we just realized that if you want to scale up and have more impact, you need credibility with the higher levels of decision making and other key stakeholders. And so you need to back your shit up with data.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things here though that I still want to make sure I understand, because let's say we address the carbon related challenges of, hey, there's too much carbon in the atmosphere and it's causing place to heat up, but we're still massively degrading the natural world and destroying biodiversity. We still have a massive environmental problem. Like the problem in some respects doesn't stop with carbon, and obviously they're related. And so part of this is there is not only a question of how do we lower our CO2 and get to net zero, but also how do we actually stop polluting the world we live in and the rest of the world lives in, if you like, in terms of the animals and everything else. And so what you're doing is instrumenting a key aspect of that, being microplastics, largely in water-related actions. Is that also microplastics not on the water in terms of in the earth and in other places? Is that an area where you're instrumenting and looking at data yet, or thinking?
No, so we've been on a really organic evolutionary journey where we had the rubbish bin in the water. We thought we were going to clean up. We just thought, you got rubbish bins on land, we'll put one in the water. And through professional and personal development and the data, we just had a lot of development, and we all like to think we're getting smarter. We're trying to. We've got a niche sector. So there's a lot of problems in the world: environmentalism, carbon, pollution, rewilding nature, regenerating farmland into bushland. There's so many different things. And this is what the biodiversity market or nature repair is addressing. And so we just fit one of the little buckets. And our niche is the pollution, but the impact of pollution in the natural environment is estimated at something like $44 trillion. It's microplastics in the water, or plastic pollution starts with tourism, for example. So if you went to Bali in December, you're going to have these onshore winds, which means all the rubbish in the water is pushed back onto the beach. And you're going to have a pretty tainted experience if you go to somewhere and there's plastic pollution. And so you probably wouldn't go back. And you tell your friends, don't go there. It was like full of crap and all this shit. But then the local restaurants start to suffer because the tourism decreases, the tourism operators, hotels. You can't sell hotel beds on a dirty beach. Food and beverage industry starts to suffer through plastic pollution because of the branded litter. So you're going to have product bans, this type of thing. The fishing industry, I can't even remember what that's worth. It's incredible, the amount of the economic value, but people are being more aware that there's microplastics in fish and in our food, and then it's getting into our bodies. It's in breast milk, it's in fetuses. And then it goes into a medical sector where people are going to be having more problems because now we're linking cancer, for example, to microplastics and plastic in general with the chemicals leaching out.
Just want to come back to one aspect, though, of the data. So understanding the data product now as it relates to plastics and microplastics in the natural world and the collection of that data, just in terms of help me to understand the economic model that you're really working through at the moment, or that have launched at the moment. How does that work?
So we'll take it back to square one. So we put a seabin in the water in a marina, and just addressing a statement you made earlier, like the plastic pollution is not from the marina.
Right.
It's generally from stormwater drains, it's from city streets, it's from upstream, downstream, across the bay. And the marinas are just a catchment point. Plastic pollution has no boundaries. It can just float around the harbour and get caught somewhere, and it just happens to be captured in a marina.
Got it.
So we put a seabin in a marina. We have staff, we have scientists, we built a microplastics research lab. And so the seabins are filtering 1.3 million litres of water a day each. We have 35 in Sydney Harbour, 34, I think, sorry. And so the enviro technicians will come around once per day or a couple of times, and they will empty the seabin. They will take a data sample. We do 16 data samples and we send that to the lab. So we're cleaning up like normal. It's just that we don't sell seabins anymore. The seabins are still operational. We're still getting heaps of crap every day. And then, so the 16 data samples get sent to the lab where Carly and Talia, the marine scientists, they'll start to count how many straws, how many plastic bags, how many microplastics, parking tickets, just there's 23 or 24 different categories.
Right.
And then, so we put that into a database, and then we start to extrapolate. We start to see patterns emerging. We start to see spikes in pollution when we've had, say, heavy rain, high winds. Worst, like the perfect storm for plastic pollution in Sydney Harbour is when you have a long period of no wind and no rain. It's very dry. The stormwater drains start filling up with plastics and pollution. And then if you get like a big heavy rain, it's a big flush. So the rain goes into the drains, goes into the stormwater drains, flushes out all this crap into the harbour. But we can start to predict this. We can start to forecast based on weather, the wind, the rain, the strength of the wind, and the direction as well. And so the impact data is what we've been counting from the positive impact we've been doing operationally in the water. And then we package that up into a report quarterly and annually. And we sell the impact data to a corporation or a multinational, a business that they want to support the oceans. And so in a world where greenwashing is like just running rampant, we have this really credible and transparent data, and essentially you can blockchain the shit out of it back to the seabin, and it's selling impact data.
Yeah. And when you gave the 3 examples of who you would sell it to, then none of them sounded like governments or institutions related to governance in terms of state government, local councils or federal. Where are they in the mix with this business model? Because it feels to me like they would also be the people who would want to, or the institutions that would want to buy this data or know this data at least.
Yeah, so out of our clients, 2% of our clients are government.
Yeah, wow.
So it's the private market that is driving this change, and that's what happened with the carbon market. Governments really slow to react, slow to work. It's glacial speed is what it's been described as. And they're not the ones to put their necks out because there's just so much online with opposition and taxpayers funded, taxpayers' money being misused. It didn't work, so they just get grilled. So what I've seen is that the private market are the early adopters. They're the trailblazers. They're on the front lines making this happen. And then the government sees this is a good thing. There's a bit of credibility. It's worth a lot. Let's jump in, create some regulations and rules around it.
I'm surprised that a national government would, like, not necessarily Australia, but Australia as an example, because we're here, or I am and you are, wouldn't say, why don't we put this in to every harbour in every major city and see which city's actually the cleanest in terms of its harbours, and then let's let you guys fight it out. Like, it seems like an amazing investment for where 90% of the population and 90% of the tourists go anyway.
Yeah, well, then it comes back to accountability and governance.
Yeah.
It's not our problem. We don't have funding for it. It's not a line item.
Yeah.
You can't prove it's ours anyway because, that would look pretty bad. It's obvious. It comes off the streets. Like they have waste service management, but it's not perfect and there's leakage. So it's almost just addressing the obvious that everyone already knows anyway.
And just like a fascinating model. And I think it's hard initially when, like, you guys have done a massive pivot. And I do want to talk about that in a little bit. But when you move from a physical product that someone can look at and go, oh, I need 4 of those, I'm going to buy 4 of those. The business model is very straightforward. When you move into something that is potentially quite ephemeral and also critical to the outcome that both parties want, but somewhat disconnected or 1 or 2 steps removed, you have to get the data, then you have to take the action, then you have to measure it, and then you go, yep, that was worth it. That's hugely, I guess, a big leap that you're making. And so I want to segue from that into what you guys are doing right now with the capital raise, because you've been around since 2016 and you've done this massive pivot, and it's clearly a much more scalable thing that you're looking towards. But you've gone the route of doing a crowdfunding, and I'm trying to understand the role that the end consumer plays in that, because typically that's why you would crowdfund. Can we talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I went to it was an Ocean Business Leaders Summit, maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago. And it was amazing. But the thing that wasn't really addressed properly was that generally, and not percentages, but it'd be like 90-something% of anybody operating in the water is very research-based or academic. It's university, and it's traditionally not for profit. And so what we did was we were like, well, I'm still renting. Like, my $4,000 car blew up just after Christmas, and I want to buy a house and I want to provide for my kids and go on holidays. And so money makes the world go around. It doesn't have to be evil. If you want to make impact, you have to do it with money. And so I wanted to create a successful business on the environment. And a lot of people really criticize me of, how come you're not doing this for free? And it's, well, how the fuck do we do that? What do you mean the money?
Yeah. Long term, right?
Well, even a not-for-profit needs money, right?
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, so we chose to be for-profit. You know what? I'm waffling. I've forgotten what the question was.
I'm trying to understand how you connect a crowd raise specifically as a way of capitalizing the business.
So we're a for-profit. We're doing this really innovative new business model that's really obvious. It's not rocket science what we do, but we decided that we weren't going to sell the Seabins anymore. We're going to sell services, but we didn't know how to make money at the time. We knew we could make money, but we didn't know how long it was. And so we're like, well, how do we raise money? And a lot of impact investors just thought what we're doing was dumb.
Right.
And so venture capitalists are like, oh, you guys are too risky. You're too this, too that. Impact investors, the irony of it is, not enough impact, guys.
Right.
We're like, okay. Anyway, so no one wanted to invest in us because we just, a long shot, it's like just, you guys are whatever. And so we saw that we have a really big community that they really like what we do because we can build purpose into their lives. It's a really big problem, plastic pollution, that where do you start? I'm only one person. How do I make an impact? And we've got a volunteer program. So, hey, if anyone wants to help be part of the solution, join us and we'll give you a pair of gloves and a bucket and data and, we'll train you up. And so it was community that have always driven us and our agenda. And so when it came down to we need to raise some money, it was, well, let's look at this community crowdfunding model, which was here in Australia with Virtual. And it was, well, we've done crowdfunding before. We gave hats and stickers away, but how about we give shares in the business?
Mm-hmm.
And so we just sold shares for $250 minimum. You could put in $1 million or $100,000 or something, but the average was maybe $700 and we raised 1.7 mil.
This was a couple of years ago, right? 3 years ago, was it?
2020. It was
just pre-COVID or in COVID.
Well, on day 4 of our equity raise, we'd raised $1 million already, and then COVID hit on day 4, and it was the craziest shit in the world, but we still ended up with 1.7 mil.
Yeah.
We did a second one the year after, and we've raised nearly $3 million.
Got it. Okay, so crowdfunding for you has been an approach to raising capital throughout. Not only you've got good engagement from this community that are aligned to the values and the outcome that you're creating, but is there an active role that these community members are playing related to the raise itself, or is it just, hey, we have this community, they're already actively engaged and helping, and we're now giving them an opportunity to participate? Just want to understand that little point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So when we've got 2,650 shareholders, I think, at the moment, and
right.
We'll send out a newsletter. Hey, everyone, we've got a message. We want to lobby the local council, or we want to lobby a politician, and can anyone tweet out this message? And you got a couple of hundred or 1,000 people lobbying on Twitter or Facebook. It's very powerful stuff.
Yeah, it's an amazing approach to business development, which is 400 of your constituents are going to call you and say, why aren't you talking to this company about this thing that they have, in this case, data, related to a problem that you should have some accountability for because I pay my rates, as an example, or I buy your product.
100%.
Yeah, it's a fascinating model. I think it reminds me a little bit of the dialogue that we had with Saudi Alan from Subpod, who I think also lives up in your part of the woods, about how just community was such a massive part of how they've been able to go out to market with, again, in their case, a product, not a service. But community was where they started. They said, there's a whole bunch of people who want this outcome. Let's bring those people together and empower them in some way, and then leverage that power, but then also enable them to share in the progress that we're making, not just the financial progress, but more broadly. Just because this is going to come out like while you're in the middle of about to do that again for a third time. People can go to Virtual and have a look about that. But just in terms of, you've pivoted between the last and this one to this data focus, like what specifically are you trying to achieve in the near term? Not specifically because of the raise, but just like where to from here, like with now the switch to data?
Yeah. So look, the original pivot was stop selling things. We're going to clean up cities for free, but we still need to make money. So we've got this sponsorships and services program.
Yep.
We thought that the services would be the one that created the bulk of the revenue. And as we kicked into gear in our communities and social media is promoting what we're up to, corporates start reaching out and they're like, hey, you guys are doing really good stuff. You got this amazing brand. You got this big community following. How can we support your impact? Do you have any data? Can we purchase it? Can we sponsor Seabins? And we're like, well, yeah,
sure.
Right. Yeah, epic. And so just through evolution, this natural product came out, which was impact data. So we're still cleaning up. We're still doing what we do, but it's just the focus is on the data, getting to the clients. We use the data. We can use it for legislation and policy, but we can also monetize it through the clients. And we've also worked out a way how we can have it open access. So you can still see the data. It's more generalized if anyone with a login or you want to download a report. But yeah, so the near-term goals of this raise is, well, next month, I think it is, we'll hit $1 million in annual recurring revenue from selling the impact data. And so it's like, well, how do we scale this up? So we need to pay some consultants, some experts, some designers to come in and essentially people that have worked in the carbon market, now in the nature repair market, to help us build a financial product and scale up our $1 million of revenue. And so this is what we want to do. So as we scale up the revenue, we'll be capturing more plastic and filtering more water, and it just goes hand in hand. And then the other goal of our raise is how do we manage the data effectively?
Right.
How do we make it accessible? This type of thing. And the idea that we have is we partnered with IBM as a technology partner. How do we use their automations, artificial intelligence? How do we create a live dashboard where anyone from a school kid to a grandparent to anyone can log in and see the information to use on school projects? But if we're selling impact data, how do you track that? And you can track that down to where the Seabins are using live feeds, this type of thing, reporting. And yeah, so we want to scale up the impact data revenue and our impacts on the natural environment, the positive impact, by creating new data products and then data management tools like a dashboard, a digital dashboard. Sorry.
I mean, it's all in service of how do you get, what's really fascinating about this for me is that I'm always reminded of the Visi business model. And for anyone who doesn't know who Visi is, they're one of the two major companies here that basically sell boxes, but they sell boxes that a whole bunch of things come in, and then they have a recycling division that gets paid to collect the boxes that they then turn into more boxes. And so the idea of getting paid to deploy your raw material and then to collect it again and then resell it again is like an amazingly fascinating and just awesome business model when you land it. And so I think the idea that you've said, you know what, there's a whole bunch of people who actually want Seabins to exist, but they're not on a waterway, so they're going to buy one for themselves, but they want it to exist in that location because it creates an outcome, which is knowledge of whether there is a problem there or whether that problem's improving or who to target to talk to about how to actually resolve that problem. And so this idea that you've just 10x the market by enabling people who want that to exist in the place to buy it or to sponsor it such that it can exist is like absolutely fascinating to me. We've talked a lot today and been fairly centric about Australia, but the ambitions here, I'm guessing, are beyond Australia. I mean, that whole model is replicable outside of Australia. Is that part of it as well? Or
Yeah. So we built a model. We started with the pilot. We built the model. We iterated, refined it, boiled it down. We've got every line item of everything that we do. We've got it dialed in where we can just copy and paste what we do. So we take the model from Sydney. We go to Los Angeles. We launched in October last year in 22.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it was just copy, paste, land and expand. So we knew we needed 2 enviro technicians. We needed a vehicle. We needed a minimum of 8 Seabins. Yeah. The minimum is between 8 and 15 of what 2 people can look after Monday to Friday.
Right.
Plus they're doing data and prevention and community programs as well. And then we need to partner with local universities. So we partnered with University of California and University Berkeley, I think it is.
Yep.
And yeah, so we've just got this model where we can land and expand, copy and paste. And we figured if we can do it in Sydney, we'll do it in LA, so North America. And then we're looking at the end of the year, possibly launching in Barcelona for our European market entry. And
amazing.
So our mission is 100 cities by 2050. We've given ourselves a couple of years just to get it dialed in. And as we start to, say, snowball, we get 2 cities online, then 4 cities per year until 2050.
There's a part of me that thinks that will actually probably be happening far sooner than you realize. We're at 2023. So I don't know, like the way these things tend to work is when you get one economic model working in one defined place and it is copy and paste, as you said, because the problem's generic and the playbook is repeatable, you will work out we can do 10 in 1 year because 10 or 4, it's the same thing. The thing has a payback period. Like absolutely fascinating. And I actually remember when Seabin first came out. So I'm personally stoked to have seen the whole arc of this story and seeing where you guys are going. I just have one last question, which relates to something that I think a lot of impact-led founders are probably going to struggle with. And that's kind of why I want to ask this question, which is at some point you had to basically say we're in the wrong business. We're solving the right problem and we have the right brand, but we're in the wrong business and we have to totally throw that out and start again. I just want to understand how you arrived at realizing that and just some of the challenges you went through. I know that might be a longer answer, but I'm okay with that because I think it's just such an amazing thing to dive into with you guys.
Yeah, look, the ultimate answer is really simple. Bank account said no.
We can't sell enough of these things, so clearly we're in the wrong business. Yeah. Well, the business model's wrong.
Yeah, computer says no, bank account says no. It wasn't a financially sustainable business model to sell one-off items.
Right.
And because I engineered and designed these Seabins to last 5, 10, 15 years.
Right.
In fantasy world, let's say that we've sold all the Seabins we can. the thing's just plateaued, right? So we've done well for X amount of years and then it's just plateaued. They're soaking up the water, they're pulling in the plastics and that's great. But we're screwed because we want to create more impact and do other things, but we can't make any more money. And so I started to research software companies because I'd heard about this acronym called ARR, which is annual recurring revenue. I found another acronym called SaaS, software as a service, and I swapped out software with Seabin. If we could get Seabins as a service, we would get annual recurring revenue, which is what we couldn't do by selling a Seabin once in a lifetime type thing or until we built a new model and this type of thing. So it just wasn't sustainable in any sense of the word. But the other trigger was the Seabin brand has become quite prominent around the world, and our manufacturing and distribution partner really let us down in terms of they just wanted to make a sale. So we had stringent perimeters of when you would put a Seabin and where you would not. They just put a Seabin everywhere. And sometimes it didn't work. And so someone would take a picture and go on Facebook and go, hey, like shit's broken, come and fix it, blah, blah, blah. But it's not even ours. It's the marinas and this sort of thing. And so it was becoming a real liability. And
from a brand perspective.
It was about to affect us a lot. And the other thing was there's a honeymoon period with a Seabin when you buy it. So the honeymoon period's between 2 and 3 months. You're stoked. You got it in the water. You're taking selfies with it. You're uploading to Facebook and look at this shit. But the thing with anything in the salt water is you get barnacles and you get seaweed and you get growth. And if you don't pressure wash a Seabin every 4 to 6 weeks or 8 weeks, depending where you are, barnacles start to grow and the thing starts to stop. And the Seabin stopped. Come and fix it. We're like, when did you pressure wash it last? Oh, like 6 months ago. We're like, yeah, well, it's probably full of mussels and oysters.
You should eat your way through it.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're like, come and fix it. We're like, well, we did. Okay, we'll come fix it. We're doing it for free. I was like, shit, we need to like charge for this. You know? And they were like, oh, hang on, services. Maybe this is the model. And so then it took a long time to make the decision because it's really scary to just stop what the thing that you know. It was making money. It wasn't the best at making money, but there was like $6 million worth of product in the water or something in 53 countries we scaled into for 2 years. And it was just like, look, it's not working. The bank account's shit. Let's just...
I'm still driving a $4,000 car and it's about to break down.
Little extra.
That was the example. I love that car.
We didn't just stop overnight. We had to make a plan. How are we going to get money? Okay, we need 2 or 3 years worth of runway. So let's do this equity crowdfunding, try and raise 3 mil, make that stretch. And then hopefully we get some traction and just fingers crossed that this is going to work.
Yeah. I think it's one of the hardest things to do is to do a complete reset on your model. Sometimes you get some external thing that says literally we're running out of the bank. We don't have the money, so we have to do it. And so I think in some respects, that's the easiest way to do it, because when you have to do it to yourself, it's even harder, especially before the writing's on the wall or when it's just on the wall and you're like in denial about it. I think the other aspect that's fascinating to me is how do you transition from being a product company to a services company? Like even if you go to your website now, it says Seabin, we don't make bins. And I'm like, there's obviously a journey you've got to take those thousands of people who are your community and the millions of people who are aware, which is we care more about the problem today than we ever did, but we realize the pathway to impact this problem is not to sell these things, but to run these things and to understand the impact they're having and to enable others to participate in that impact. And I think super brave, and I think everyone will get that. Even hopefully if they listen to this, they'll definitely get it. But even at a short run, I think people will start to get their head around it. And the other thing, as soon as you write 1 or 2 case studies, people will go, oh, that totally makes sense. And that's far more valuable than put a bin there and 6 weeks later it doesn't work anymore because the barnacles got involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way we implemented this was working with our clients, the ex-clients, which are now still, some of them are still our clients, which, well, we said to them like, hey guys, this isn't working. How about we'll buy the Seabins back off you and then we'll clean them up. We're going to put them back in the water, but we're going to clean up. We're going to maintain these things for free. Your marina is going to be cleaner every day. You don't have to pressure wash it. You don't even have to change the filter. We got Envirotechs. They're going to come in twice a day in their vans. They're going to do all this stuff. And they're like, fuck yeah.
Where do we start?
Yeah. And then they're like, well, who's
The price
paying
is
for
right.
this? Yeah. Yeah. And then, but the marinas are like, well, if we're not paying for it, like who's paying for this? Well, so we've got Ben and Jerry's and Discovery Channel and Yamaha and like all these multinationals that want to help the environment, save the oceans. They're going to put their names on it, and they've got this impact data that they're using for sustainability reporting, marketing purposes. And they're like, yeah, let's do it.
Right.
And so the best thing that we did was, well, two things that we did. One of the best things, the first of the two things that we did was we went to private infrastructure. We went to the private sector. We stayed well away from government. And we said to the marinas, yacht clubs, cafes that were living on the wharves and stuff, hey, we want to put the Seabins in. They're like, hell yeah, go for it. We're bringing the media down. We're going to promote you. We're going to do this and that. Yeah. And everyone just said yes, because so we didn't need the permission of a city or a council or a government to do majority of what we want. And so every city that we launch in, we go straight to the private sector and we're like, hey, we're going to clean up and blah, blah, blah. And so that was really quick market entry with hardly any red tape. There's some directors, board meetings, these type of things to make a decision with it. But, and the other thing that we did was like, well, how are we going to find the people to these envirotechs and the scientists and stuff? And how do we find our tribe in a city that we have no friends? We don't know anyone.
Right.
And so we have a really good relationship with Patagonia, the outdoor clothing brand. And so we said, well, we're only going to launch a city where there's a Patagonia store within, say, a 20 or 30 kilometer radius.
Right.
And then we go to the Patagonia store. So using LA, for example, we're in Marina Del Rey. We went to HQ and said, hey, we want to launch. Can we speak to the people at Santa Monica? They're like, hell yeah, go for it, Pete. And so I went over there and we went in. We're like, hey, this is Pete. And this is Brian. And
here's one of my bins.
Yeah, we're doing this cool shit over in Marina Del Rey. And have any of your friends, do they want jobs? Does any of your community want jobs? We're looking for scientists. We're looking for envirotechs, like this sort of thing. And they're like, oh yeah, my buddy Bruce is like rock climbing and he's a really good marine ecological botanist, whatever. I don't know. I might just totally mash that. But so we're just going in, tapping into the communities and activating them with what we're up to, what they want anyway, and finding employment and our tribe of their tribe.
It's like a fascinating distribution model emerging, and I think will be fascinating like business model and a fascinating recruitment model all in one. So I can hats off to you with all of these pivots and moves. Pete, we'll leave it there for today. That's actually the longest interview we've ever done, which I love. We don't ever have an absolute stop time, but for what you're doing right now, which people listening to this straight away will be aware of, there's the key dates, I think, is expression of interest before June 5, and then the rest of it will flow out from there. Limited to Australians, I believe. Is that right? From virtual?
Yeah, so anyone in the world, except for a couple of SARS countries like Russia and some other, like North Korea or something, I think it is. Anyone in the world can invest, but the perimeters are we can't do any paid advertising outside of Australia. And the key dates are we're in the expressions of interest. So you can register your interest, check out the pitch video at the virtual website. And then we're going to change the date a little bit. So we're going to launch on World Oceans Day, which is June the 8th. And that's when people can put down $250 or whatever. Yeah. So last time we raised $1 million in a day and then we closed 1.2 in 4 days. And it was epic. So we're hoping to get the same traction this time around. We've got a really good revenue coming in. You know, the share price has increased since last time. And we're doing more impact. And one thing I didn't tell you was that we're talking about data and all this stuff, and I'm like swearing and saying wrong rude words and that. But the impact of what we've done in Sydney as our first pilot, which started in July 2020, is we've filtered over 14 billion litres of water and captured over 100 tonnes of microplastics and plastic pollution. And we've employed 14 more people, I should say. You know, this is during COVID and all the outbreaks and people losing jobs and stuff. And we're just really trying to dial in to give people meaning, purposeful jobs and just increase our impact. Yeah.
Ticks all the boxes. Awesome. Well, go and check that out at Virtual. Pete, thank you again for joining us today, and hopefully we can play a small part in the continued success of what you guys are doing, and I can't wait to see how this model unfolds for you.
Yeah, epic. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks. This is a great chat.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.